Kamala Harris continues to be the clear frontrunner for the 2028 Democratic primary, nearly 4 months after her resounding defeat to Donald Trump in the 2024 election. Kamala Harris leads with a whopping 36% support from the Democratic Party. Meanwhile, Pete Buttigieg is 28 points behind at 8 points, with Gavin Newsom, Gretchen Whitmer, and Tim Walz tied for third, each at 4%. They are the governors of California, Michigan, and Minnesota, respectively. And all 5 of these top 5 candidates, I find it highly unlikely that any of them are ever going to be elected president. Democrats have a lot of work to do in the next 3 years to find a candidate that's actually electable and remove Kamala Harris as the de facto leader of the Democratic Party. Meanwhile, on the Republican side, J.D. Vance is also dominating just like Kamala Harris was. Vance is seen as the clear successor to Donald Trump, and he leads by a 20-point margin according to the most recent poll, by 29 points according to a poll conducted just a few years prior. Vance at 37 and 39%. This most recent poll has Donald Trump Jr. in second place, commanding 17% support. Ron DeSantis at just 6. DeSantis does not have the backing that he did when he challenged Trump in 2024. I mean, there were times where DeSantis was actually the favorite to win the Republican nomination over Trump, but that will probably never be the case again. I don't expect Ron DeSantis to ever be the Republican nominee for president, but J.D. Vance definitely has a very good chance, and things are currently going very well for the vice president. In fact, he gets more popular by the day. When he was first nominated to be the vice presidential candidate for the GOP, he was underwater by 10 points. Going into the election, he wasn't seen favorably. Now, today, he is still underwater, but as you can see, over time, as more and more Americans have gotten to know the vice president, his popularity has only continued to go up. And so in this video, I'll be making a very early prediction between Kamala Harris and J.D. Vance in the 2028 presidential election if both vice presidents are to be nominated by their respective parties. We're going to begin by filling in the solid states for both candidates, starting off with Vice President Harris. These are states she is going to win by 15 percentage points or more. I'm going to start off on the West Coast. She is going to carry Washington and California, both states that she won by solid margins against Donald Trump. She is also going to take Hawaii, along with Vermont, Massachusetts, Maryland, the District of Columbia, and the 1st District of Maine. That is literally going to be it. Just 98 electoral votes for Kamala Harris. I mean, when we were talking about 2020, Joe Biden was starting off with nearly 200 electoral votes in the safe column, and that is basically what he got. He got 183 electoral votes from states he won by 15 points or more. Fast forward 4 years, Kamala Harris gets just 98, and in her second run against J.D. Vance here, hypothetically, I don't see her doing any better. We're now going to fill in the solid states for J.D. Vance. Many of them are going to be solid states that Trump carried in 2024. I mean, states like South Carolina, Indiana, Kansas, states that potentially could have gone to him by less than 15 points. He won all of them by safe margins. We also saw incredible gains for the GOP in both Texas and Florida, nearly 10-point shifts in both. He also did very well in both Iowa and Ohio. Ohio, of course, is the home state of J.D. Vance. And so we're now going to fill in the solid states for the incumbent vice president, starting off in the West with Utah, Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, North and South Dakota. We also have all of Nebraska except its 2nd district, Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, Indiana, and South Carolina. But we're not just going to stop there. We are going to add a few more states to this list. Donald Trump won with an incredible margin of victory in 2024, but J.D. Vance is definitely the more electable of the two. He appeals more broadly to independent voters. Trump did very well with that block, but I do believe that if the circumstances are right, J.D. Vance could potentially perform even better, especially in the Midwest. He is, of course, from Ohio. He served as the U.S. Senator from Ohio for 2 years before becoming a vice president. I can see him winning the state by 15 points or more. Same goes for neighboring Iowa. We also have both Texas and Florida. I can definitely see Vance outperforming Trump by 1 or 2 points down south. I will also be including the state of Alaska and 3 additional electoral votes. So with the solid states filled in for both candidates, J.D. Vance takes a huge lead early on with 218 to Kamala Harris's 98. We're now going to move on to the likely states, starting again with the former vice president. On the West Coast, she is going to take Oregon. It's not going to be as blue as it once was, but it's really unlikely at this point the Democrats are actually going to lose it anytime soon. We also have Colorado and Illinois. Illinois was a solid blue state for the longest time. I mean, from 2012 all the way to 2020, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and Joe Biden all won the state by nearly exactly 17%. But when Kamala Harris came into the picture, she carries it by just 10. I mean, it was an abysmal performance. I don't see her making any gains in the Midwest in her second run. In the Northeast, we have Connecticut and Rhode Island, along with Joe Biden's home state of Delaware, and this is going to give Harris 149 electoral votes, still trailing J.D. Vance quite significantly. It's now time for the likely states for the vice president. Now, the list is not going to be that long because a lot of likely states I've already put into the solid category. Likely states from 2024, I can see J.D. Vance improving on for the GOP in 2028. But we're going to start off with Arizona. This was a shocker. Donald Trump carried Arizona by 5.5%, a state that he didn't even win back in 2020. Trump flips Arizona. It's once again in the Republican category. I don't see Democrats winning presidential elections there for at least a little while. I can see J.D. Vance matching Trump's performance down in the Sun Belt. We also have the 2nd District of Maine and North Carolina. At the end of the day, North Carolina is still a relatively red state. Trump carried it by 3.2%. In Georgia, he only won by 2.2. North Carolina is one of the only swing states that went to Trump in 2016, 2020, and 2024. Out of the 7 most competitive swing states in 2024, it was the only one that he won in all 3 elections, and I can see Republicans continuing to make gains in the Tar Heel state for years to come. Alright, I actually forgot to include New York there earlier, but it's going to be likely blue. Kamala Harris is going to win the Empire State. However, she is going to struggle from this point on. We're now going to fill in the lean states that she is going to win by 1 to 5 point margins. I'm going to start off with New Mexico. It was a 6-point margin in 2024. We also have the 2nd District of Nebraska, which was lean against Donald Trump. And then in Maine, she won by just over 6 points. I don't see her winning it by more than 5 in a matchup against Vance. We also have New Jersey. I mean, this was one of the biggest surprises of the entire election. It was solid blue in 2020. Joe Biden carried it by 16 points. Even Hillary Clinton won it by a double-digit margin, 14.1. I mean, it was a shock just how close New Jersey was, and this was with barely any campaigning from the Trump side. He did a few rallies in New York and New Jersey, but I mean, that was not significant at all. Kamala Harris wins by just 5.9%. Now that New Jersey is a target for Republicans, they're going to put in more money. I can definitely see them winning the state potentially in the very near future. Now, in 2028, I don't see them flipping it quite yet, but I can definitely see the margin go down to being below 5. And then the final lean state for Kamala Harris is going to be Virginia, 13 electoral votes. The margin there was cut in half from Biden to Harris. Biden carried it by 10.1. Harris wins it by just 5.8. And so with all of the solid, likely, and lean states filled in for the former vice president, she still trails J.D. Vance. She is at just 212 electoral votes. And it's now time to fill in the lean states for the incumbent vice president, J.D. Vance. I think he's going to do just as well as Trump did in the battlegrounds. There's no doubt it's going to be 7 for 7 in terms of the sweep. Now, in 2028, though, we might see a different map. This is what I think the map is going to look like, at least right now. Although Arizona and North Carolina, these 2 states are going to be competitive. I'm not fully confident that J.D. Vance is going to win them by more than 5 points. Although I think, based on how things are going right now, that is the most educated guess that we can make. And so looking at the remaining states here, Minnesota and New Hampshire really stand out because these are states that Kamala Harris was supposed to win very easily. Joe Biden carried New Hampshire by 7 points. Minnesota, same margin for Joe Biden. Now, the thing was, Kamala Harris had Tim Walz, the state's literal governor, on the ballot with her, and she could only manage a measly 4.2% margin of victory. And so I'm going to start off now with the lean states for JD Vance. Nevada, there's no doubt he wins that. He's also going to win Georgia, and he's going to sweep the former blue wall, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. I mean, it's basically become the red wall at this point, given that Republicans have won all 3 states in the last 2 of the last 3 elections, and if JD Vance carries it on, it's going to be 3 out of the last 4. And then finally, we have just Minnesota and New Hampshire. I mean, the margin in New Hampshire was even closer than Minnesota. It was just 2.8%. This is 2 years after Maggie Hassan, the Democrat, won her re-election to the U.S. Senate against a relatively strong Republican candidate by a double-digit margin. New Hampshire was thought to have taken a pretty big step to the left in the midterms, but Trump comes back. He makes New Hampshire more competitive than it was when he lost to Joe Biden, losing New Hampshire by 7.4%. Now, New Hampshire has been closer. In 2016, Hillary Clinton came very close to losing it, and in 2028, if the matchup is between JD Vance and Kamala Harris, I can see the vice president winning both of these races, Minnesota and New Hampshire. They're both going to be tilted red, margins of likely under 1%. And so this will give JD Vance 326 electoral votes and Kamala Harris just 212. And so this would be the worst performance for any Democrat since Michael Dukakis's in 1988 when he was the Democratic nominee running against George H.W. Bush. Kamala Harris at 212, I mean, she would get this record a second time. Her performance in 2024 was already the worst since Dukakis, and with 212, she's going to lower that bar even more. JD Vance at 326, this would be the best Republican performance since George H.W. Bush's, again, back in 1988. This would be a historic matchup, and it seems pretty likely, at least right now, that this is the most possible matchup for the next election. Republicans should be feeling good. Of course, a lot can change in the next 3 years, but right now, as of March 2025, Republicans are in a very solid position concerning both the midterms and the next presidential election. Thank you guys so much for watching this update. I'll see you guys in the next video. Make sure you like this video if you enjoyed it. Comment down below who you think will win the 2028 election, who you think the nominees are going to be, and make sure you subscribe if you haven't for more content just like this.